It's with great pleasure today that we join an Australian legend, I'm going to call him, Tim Ross, Australian comedian, radio host and design enthusiast, and of course, television presenter, studied drama and music at RMIT and La Trobe University, began his career alongside Merrick Watts back in 1996, and has had an incredible career in entertainment, in as I said, radio, TV. He's also an author and is now heavily involved in architecture. So we're very keen to explore all those topics and more on Chats with Pav. Tim, thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be with you, buddy. Really good to be with you. I'm just having a little cup of tea while I talk.
Well, so this is, I like this. Multitasking is not a strength of mine. I'll get to that in a minute and whether you're good at that. But what tea are you drinking?
Mate, it's really boring, but I'm on the herbal tea. I recently gave up coffee, which I never thought I'd be able to do. But it wasn't good for me, making me a bit angry with the kids. So
right,
it's like too many cups of coffee. You know, like I was drinking probably 6 cups of coffee a day, which is not good for anyone, particularly me. No. So went cold turkey.
How's that? Was that would have been tough?
Well, it wasn't as hard as giving up ice, but you know. It's easy. It's actually easy. I just find another, you find another substitute for it. And I drink a lot of hot chocolates with oat milk now when I'm out and about. And you don't drink 6 of those. So I'm pretty tough these days, mate.
So kids, you mentioned 2. I think you've got 2 of them, right?
Yeah, 2 boys. Yeah.
And so I've got 2 boys as well. I think we're slightly offset in ages. I've also got a daughter, but the 2 boy thing's a vibe, right? It's a thing. I'm not sure about your 2, but ours have got plenty of energy, and they need to get outside and move. Is that similar for you?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to get them into a situation where you can put them outside, and preferably there's a couple of star pickets around or some anything that they can spirit each other. And I do everything to try and stop them from doing that. And there's just something in the makeup of young boys. It's just like, if there's anything that could be some sort of sword or spear, brothers, even though mine are tight as and love each other to death, given the opportunity to maim each other with some sort of piece of wood that they may or may not have sharpened themselves, they'll give it a go every time. And their energy is extraordinary. And but I love their zest for life, and they'll take everything on. So it's whether they're, yes, they was down the skate park with them, or they're riding their bikes around, or they're kicking the footy around, or soccer's really their main bag. They take it all on, and then they go, oh, there's a cricket bat, they'll do that. And I love that. And we I suppose, we're sort of blessed in this country to have the space for us to be an active nation. And I think, our association with sport's really interesting, and our success at sport doesn't happen by accident, so I was walking past one of the local pools recently, and I'm writing this new book on summer, so I just sort of sat down and I was looking at this local pool, and it was a huge thing in the post-war period where suddenly every town got an Olympic-sized pool, and it became country towns, suburban towns, and they became the center of places particularly for people who weren't near the beach, to learn to swim and to swim well. And so because of that, we've got this reasoning that this is why we're really successful at swimming at the Olympics. It doesn't come out of nowhere. And it's not just because we can, we're physically fabulous. It's the circumstances make sport part of who we are. And I suppose one of the things that worries me, we're talking about how we live in the future and how design comes into play. And my interest in architecture now is that we've taken it for granted that we can all play. Kids have been able to play sport on Saturday mornings, Saturday afternoons. We're going to run out of ovals in this country, especially in the cities. There's going to be 1 million kids playing soccer and footy, and plus, and then we add people playing for longer. So, men and women playing sport for longer. And this wonderful influx of girls playing all sports, which is terrific. But for some of the planning for that, it just doesn't come into play. So, you know, we have to start thinking about those open spaces that we've taken for granted if we want to see our kids and adults succeed at sport in the future. And we'll have, you know, lots of open spaces, and that's the debate that will happen about.
Have you got a solution? Have you got a solution for space and grounds? Because I know, you know, soccer, AFL, NRL, everyone's in a bit of an arms race for more space and more ovals and facilities for girls, right? That's a huge
that's a huge thing.
And
so look, the facilities thing is a building issue, and that's just funding and you know, but in terms of space and size, I mean, it will change. It will be, you know, your kids will play school sport will be on weeknights. And it's just going to have to be like that, you know, like, and the private schools have to share, and they should share.
Absolutely.
And you know, they are recipients of huge amounts of money from the government, and that we've got, whether it's their classrooms or their theatres, their music rooms or their swimming pools, or all those things should be seen as public amenity. I think that's a big part of it. And the one that's really controversial that they've been doing in Sydney is having a red hot look at public golf courses and deciding, you know, how many people can use them. Is it the best use of space within an urban environment? You know, like, and that one's, you know, the golfers go mad about that stuff, but everything changes.
Even just golf, right? I mean, I like playing golf, but golf is such a long and drawn out game. And maybe there was a reason for that a long time ago when they first decided to start it. But, you know, expectations and family life and work, like, it's changed, right? I don't care.
100%. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Pav, because I mean, let's put it in, you know, let's not put it in an agenda basis about this, but there are not many people, men or women, who are over a certain age who could say, I'm going to spend a full day on the weekend, who have got children, playing golf. That's really hard for anyone to navigate. So if that space can be used in a different way, or halved, you know, do we need 18 holes for a public course? Maybe it's 9 holes, and you know, it's unfortunate. And
I get golf fatigue after about 12. Like 12 is about perfect, because nine's just not enough. Like you're either hitting it well or you know, you started poorly and you're coming back. I reckon 12 or 13's about perfect. So, you know, maybe those other 6 or whatever it may be.
You really, especially if you're playing with other people, you know, you're going through the motions of that, and who are good. Those last 5 or 6, you're thinking about
just
the
get me
cans
to
at
the
the
19th and give me a beer.
Exactly right. You're just like, oh, that'll do. Yeah, I'll just run them through it. So yeah, I think how we look at stuff, because I think the broader point with it is that when our kids can't play in the way that they used to, and the governments have been, you know, state governments, I think, have been pretty good at opening up green space all over the place. And one of the things we've seen with COVID is a deeper understanding and respect of public space, especially as our cities become more apartment focused. Certainly it's not, you know, in, say, Adelaide and Perth, you're not in the same situation. What's going on in Melbourne and Sydney. Brisbane's certainly getting into more of a high-rise city, but you've still got a little bit of breathing space in particularly in Perth. You know, we're saying everyone gets smashed, and, you know, a city like Perth is, how much further can you push out? How much further can the infrastructure can't go? So you're going to have to squeeze everything more in. You can't just keep going west or north or south, because the facilities won't be there. The train stations won't be there. You know,
Perth and Adelaide, where I've spent most of my life, is, you know, you can only really go north and south, because you've got coast on one side and the hills on the other.
Yeah.
And you can, you know, get over the hills and all those things, but it's, you know, you are restricted in some ways, north and south. Whereas, and look, you know, clearly everyone, you know, Sydney's the same. You know, you have to go west. Yes, you can go further, Brisbane, you know, but it's an interesting, and I'm interested in your take on this. What got you into design and architecture and space, and what was your thing
Yeah, I think I was a kid when I was a kid growing up in the suburbs of Melbourne, on the Mornington Peninsula. I grew up in a place called Mandalay. There was just interesting houses that were built around me when I was a kid, and I just think there was something in that. A lot of those houses, particularly the really interesting houses that were built in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and I was born in 1970, and so I was seeing those houses as a kid, a lot of them around. They got under my skin somehow, and I'd always been interested in Australian history and the intersection of everything really. So I think that was one of the things about being a Melburnian. I like the ability for how broadly the arts is respected in the same way as sport is, and that way that all walks of life can talk about football. And so you can go to the footy in the morning or the afternoon, or go to the gallery beforehand, or all those things. Yeah. It's sort of a vibrant, thoughtful city in that way. And I was blessed to grow up in that environment. So I suppose Melbournians don't really think of them as silos. Of course you like footy, and of course you like literature, and of course you like art and architecture, and theatre, and music, and all everything. Culture is, it's all the same. I think it's all part of the fabric in a city like Melbourne. Harder to get in Sydney because there's sort of those divides with sporting codes. There's this union league, soccer. And I, as someone who grew up talking about footy, I couldn't believe it when I moved to Sydney, and people didn't really talk about rugby league in my circles very much, because they weren't interested, or they were interested in other things, or they might be rugby union or soccer people. So there wasn't that sort of uniting factor. And then AFL was something you sort of had to go out of your way to sort of keep up with, rather than people just talking around it. So it wasn't so much of a surprise, but I suppose as I got older and I started collecting furniture, getting deeply interested into architecture and the stories of Australian architecture, and traveling a lot while I was still doing sort of mainstream breakfast radio, all my sort of secret passion was architecture and design. And it got to the stage, I was in my sort of late 30s and early 40s, and I started thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I'd had this real burning desire to make a show about Australian architecture from the 50s and 60s and 70s, that architecture that I grew up around, and what it said about our identity, and why our suburbs, to me anyway, appeared to be far more interesting, the architecture of our suburbs in the past compared to what we had today. And so that led me down that path, and I did the first of my series for the ABC, and amongst that time I started a new live show that where I performed in architecturally significant houses, started talking about design and architecture. Instagram helped that in a huge way, helping me connect with people not just here but all over the world who had similar interests. And that's where I end up today, as I suppose a really a very different second act, and a really fulfilling second act of my career.
I find it when we have these chats with numerous people from different walks of life, there's a real strong sense of curiosity that exists in them, whether that was born in the suburbs they grew up in, the family they grew up in, the experiences they had, but a real sense of curiosity, not only for what might be their sweet spot, which is sport or art or whatever it may be, business, politics, but trying to absorb and find interest in other pursuits. And clearly you've got that in you. Where did this passion, though, for music and drama and I guess entertainment, your first part of your career, where was that born?
I suppose stage has been the place where I've felt the most alive and felt the most comfortable in some ways. And I remember that from being at school and doing plays and doing little skits and whatever. I just liked it. My old man was an amateur performer and a very funny man. And so that part of it. I grew up around seeing him doing plays and doing funny things and telling jokes. And he was much more of an extrovert than I am. He was very good at holding court, and he was of that generation where they'd had party tricks and, had the stories that they'd roll out all the time.
Have you got any examples? Is there a
Oh,
party trick that your dad taught you?
yeah, I did. He didn't taught me, but he teach it to me. But one of the things I loved, like our next door neighbors had a housewarming party, and they're much younger than my folks. And my dad walked around and some dress up party or something, but he did a bit of magic, shit magic from time to time. I think it's one of these things when he was a kid. But he had a deck of cards, and he'd go pick a card, any card, and then they'd say, look at it, don't tell me what it is, and then he'd go, oh, is it the four of diamonds? And they'd go, yes, it's the four of diamonds. How did you know? Well, a magician never reveals his tricks. But his deck of cards, they were all the four of diamonds, and I just thought it was the simplest but best trick ever. Like
that is very good.
Yeah, it's great. So I think those little moments like that were important to me, and the fun. I see it with my kids, particularly my youngest, who has he has a similar bent with that. He enjoys the fun of those small moments where you can entertain people. And so I went through school doing, like most of us who ever performed, doing the school plays and all that sort of stuff. And when I got to university, I was doing theatre and started playing in a band and started doing stand-up and just loved it. Melbourne in the 90s was amazing for that. It was a real DIY time. You sort of felt like anything was possible if you had to go. That whole grunge era, that sort of opened up sort of music to anyone, was the idea that as long as you had a guitar or an amp, you could just play. You didn't have to be that great. And I was never a great musician, but I loved having a go. So and I took that sort of rock and roll inner city music ethos to how we set up what we were doing with comedy. I learned a lot from putting on shows in the band, and when I started working together with Merrick, I put a lot of those things into place, and amongst what the live act was, how we pursued things helped us become, pretty successful pretty quickly, to be honest.
So I'm an 80s baby, early 80s baby, 81, and that grunge era of music, strongly resonates with me. Again, I was no good at playing, but I loved the music, particularly out of that Seattle kind of really American grunge stuff. That's what I grew up with, and I still love to this day, at least that kind of vibe that comes through. What inspired the partnership with Merrick? Because you guys had a really successful time together over a long period of time, TV, radio, performing. What inspired that connection and that longevity?
I suppose the initial thing was that Merrick had seen my band, and he said, "Oh, you were both on the same stand-up bill one night at the Esplanade Hotel in St Kilda." And I was like, "Oh shit! I don't think I knew too many people had seen my band that I didn't know." And he sort of liked it, so it appealed to my ego. And I watched him do stand-up, and I thought he was fantastic. And we're pretty young on the scene. I think we hit it off pretty quickly, and I liked what he did. I liked his confidence, and he had a bit of gumption. He still does, obviously, but he had a really clear idea that he wanted to be successful. And I knew lots of people who just didn't have much drive. They were good, but didn't have much drive. And I was pretty driven too. And so I think there was a deep respect for each other's sense of humor, and we had a similar sense of humor. I think in many ways we felt a bit like outsiders in certain ways within the comedy world. I think maybe I certainly did.
And why is that? So if you had an idea and drive, like but why did you think you're different to others?
I just didn't feel. It just didn't feel like my world. I suppose I was just a different. I think it was because most of my stuff had been sort of quite. It's a bit nerdy, but I was in the music scene, and that's how I did things, and how I wanted to do things, you know, the way I wanted to put on shows. I didn't really like, I didn't like the way that the industry worked. I just didn't see that there was halfway of going on and waiting. The way you do it is you do a whole bunch of gigs for nothing to get your experience, so you can do another gig, and you wait, and you always having to ring someone up, hoping you could get on Tuesday night for nothing. Then you're waiting for that gig. And which is a good way of getting your skills up. But and then at the end, you'd become a headline act and get $100. And whereas it wasn't about money, it was about building your own audience.
Yeah.
So I just didn't see how you could build a fan base by being on a Tuesday night at a pub when someone else is taking $8 a door. And, you know, like they couldn't come and then every time they come and see you, you'd be doing the same gear. That's not how I was seeing how you could sort of create a fan base. And Merrick sort of got that too, I think. And we wanted to do things outside of a 5-minute spot in a comedy room or a 10-minute spot. And you wanted to have the room to be creative and do different things. And I just saw the limitations of it. And so when Nez and I started doing shows together, we'd go out and we'd make films, and it was pretty low tech. You know, like if we'd had what we could have done today, who knows what we would have done. But, you know, like we'd go out with I'd borrow a camera off someone, I'd edit it up on a VHS player, and Merrick could have a bag of wigs, and we'd just do the dumbest things. And then some places that might have an inbuilt video screen in the pub. Other places, I think I'd take the telly out of the lounge room and put it on a table in the pub in front of everyone and push play on a VHS player. People love that shit. And then we got an old overhead projector, and we started writing prank letters to famous celebrities and, you know, pretending to be all little kids and asking for autographs and free shit. And the letters were hilarious. And we do sketches and all these sort of things. And, you know, and the audience loved it. And so on that Tuesday night, rather than being, you know, second person on a comedy bill in front of 70 people that were there for whatever reason, because they just happened to be there, and we'd have 350 people at a venue coming to see us and paying us to do that, which gave us the confidence to keep going, to tour all over the place. So it wasn't, let's not put it aside as any sort of, you know, genius of business. It's sort of creative and ego driven in many ways. Yeah. And also, sorry, it's just if you, I know it's, I mean, and also if you're doing something really creative, it doesn't always work in every environment, pub environments. Pubs are fucking terrible places to perform. You know, they're made for poker machines and people getting pissed and Parmigiana. So you're sort of fighting against all that. You know, but it's a great training ground. Yeah. So, and then there's people, and you know, in those days, people, they still are, but people are awful. What they yell out and what it can do for your confidence. So, if you can create your own environment, what everyone calls a tribe, you've got a safe place to perform, and I think that probably had a lot more to do with it. I know there's a long answer to it.
No, I love that. And so, I mean, effectively, you're a startup business. If you think about
100%.
What it be turned now, and all those lessons you learn about resilience and digging in and being creative and, you know, just trying stuff and getting heckled. Lots of great lessons there, I'm sure. How did you, you know, how did you kind of deal with that? And do you think they're transferable to the things you're doing now, whether that's as a parent or in the stuff you're doing now with architecture?
I think I sort of went back to when I started again. I went back to those early days and how we put things together, and the simple fact of, you know, the DIY side of things, you know. And I suppose today's world is, you'll see it with you know, like with brands and wanting to work with influencers, you know, you're going straight to the person. And so you're removing all those layers. And so this idea of creating your own content, so being able to film things and put them on Instagram and what everyone does, you know, the more successful you get, there's more, the more layers come into play, whether it's management, assistants. Oh, we've got to get someone to shoot this. You become further and further away from your actual business. The more successful you get. And I think you lose touch of certain things. And so part of what I really enjoyed in the early days of part 2 of my career was, you know, self-publishing things, making little magazines again, like I used to do in the 90s, going down to Office Works and, you know, cutting things together and sending off in post packs or something. It was just a, I don't know, a back to basics approach to stuff. When it's just you and an audience, you know, which is the purest form of what you want to do as a performer. And then, you know, on radio, you've got an audience there, but then you got a program director, you got clients that need to be serviced and all those sorts of things. And, you know, most people, unless they're completely insane, would take a relationship with the audience every single time. You know what I mean?
Yep.
For that reason, because
it feels like you've almost gone full circle, right? You're going back to your roots in some ways.
Yeah.
That middle part of your career was fantastic, and, you know, maybe more commercial than it is now, and it was to begin with. But it sounds like you wouldn't change it for the world, but you've sort of gone back to where it started.
Yeah, it's 100% Pav. It's basically it was reconnecting with performing and reconnecting with pure passion, and you know, along the way, sometimes that other things get in the way, you know, and you know, I was texting Merrick yesterday about something, you know, old things I couldn't remember that we were doing or something, and he was talking about some joke we used to do back in the day, which I'd forgotten about, and I was sort of laughing, and well, I was laughing. I wasn't sort of laughing because it was hilarious because we were funny ass. But yeah, and I can't, and it's not fair for me to speak on his behalf on this stuff. But I would presume that there are times when, you know, it's not something I've spoken to him about. Probably will next time I talk to him. But somewhere along the way, the reason for why you started doing things gets lost, and you can either reconnect with that, or you just keep doing what you're doing, and, you know, it becomes about perhaps all the wrong reasons. And I respect my peers who you can clearly see that they make decisions because they for fame or money, and that's their journey. But I find that I find that completely unfulfilling. Hang on a second, mate. Bugs, do you want to take? My son's got to go on a Zoom school. Do you want to go on with? Can you go on with my phone?
We'll be done shortly, mate. That's fine. That's good.
We got what time you got to do? You got another 15 minutes. Can we do that?
Plenty. Yeah.
All right, go. All right. Sorry, mate. Sorry.
No, that's all good.
Mate, I'll be done in 15. Okay. Otherwise, you'll have to go find the link.
If you need to jump off early, mate, that's fine.
Yeah, if we finish up in 15 minutes, good. I'll come and get you, Bugsy. Sorry, mate.
And so I'm happy to, you know, talk about so I finished in my first career 5 years ago, and transitioned into this sort of sweet spot at the moment around doing a bit of media and a bit of business. And it's very fulfilling what I'm doing, particularly the business stuff. But it's an interesting time, I think, for anyone that transitions out of a life they've lived for a long period of time, about what they find the fulfilling bit. Where's contentment, or what do you find really interesting and enjoyable? And I think your point's valid in the sense that everyone goes through this journey themselves. Do I double down on commercializing it or having a great time in that way? Or do I go back to what I am really passionate about? Is that something that you work through yourself, or did you talk to wife, to Merrick,
no,
other people? What's it?
I mean, I think it was something I sort of naturally came to, and I think I probably just, and look, there's nothing wrong with commercializing things, and you know, you've got to make a living, and you got to and that's top of mind for me. But it's, I think all of us, but it's what you really love, right? It's just doing that. Look, I reckon that the moment it sort of dawned on me was that I was in Los Angeles and I was catching up with a friend of mine for a cup of coffee, and his grandparents were these American designers, Charles and Ray Eames, and very influential in the post-war period. And their furniture sold all over the world, and an amazing house in America that's now a museum. And two of my favorite designers, um, and they lived their life for design, and they just everything was intertwined. And Eames is the grandson, Eames Demetrius, and Eames gave me a book of his grandfather's quotes, and I just opened up the book, and I'm not really into inspirational sort of quotes. It's not really my bag. It's but this particular one was that it was from his grandfather, was take your pleasure seriously. And what he meant by that is that you give the things that you love the respect they deserve. And so everyone gives their jobs, it's always our deepest, darkest secret that we give our jobs everything, and we don't give the things we love the respect they deserve. And for too many years, I've met people who say, I used to draw, I used to play the piano, I used to play tennis, play the violin, I used to paint, whatever it was, I used to play guitar. Someone, I used to play the piano, and someone says, I haven't played the piano for 20 years. And it's like, I don't know what, I can't play the piano, but I couldn't imagine if I could that I wouldn't have a little tinkle of the ivories from time to time, or I used to ski or bushwalk or whatever it is, and life gets in the way. And so I suppose what he meant by that is that why take your work so seriously when you should take your passion seriously? And I sort of worked out I was already on that journey, and it just sort of crystallized for me that really that's what I do is I take my pleasure seriously. The things that I love, and that's performing and talking to people and arts-based projects. And I give it the respect I deserve. And also coming with that is also knowing, and that's the hardest thing, is working out what it is. It seems really easy to know what you love. And not falling into the traps that everyone else does just because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Like, there's this whole man cave movement, get a shed if you're a man, you need a shed to put your stuff in. And I love that. And I understand that, but it's not for me because I worked out that the world is my shed. I need to go on tour. I need to meet people. I need to have conversations with people. That's where my inspiration comes from. That's where my stories come from meeting people and hanging out. So I know that that's part of what I need from life. And so that sort of ethos of taking my pleasure seriously is what drives all my projects.
I love that. I love the firstly knowing what you need from life. I think that's a really good thing. Most people go and continue to search for that answer. And if you know that, that's gold. Right? That's the beautiful part of what you've been able to take. The other bit, I love that. Take your pleasure seriously. I'll be taking that one with me from this chat. And the men's shed. So I'm not a shed guy either. I'm someone who gets it. I think I'm sort of that balance of extrovert and introvert. I need the time by myself, but I actually get really inspired by having a listen to other people talk and hearing their stories. I'm interested though, just to go back a little bit to the commercialization thing in brands, because clearly you've worked with lots of big brands, whether they're media, entertainment brands, or other sort of more product-based things that you've worked with. What do you look for when pairing or aligning with a brand? What's your thing?
I suppose that a lot of the time, the brand itself is important, but often it's the people within the brand. They're easy to work with. And, I've worked with lots of brand managers over the time that are they're so pushed from above, or the culture, no matter whether or not you think the brand works with who you are and what you stand for. But if they've got a corporate culture that makes anyone you're going to work with within that brand miserable, you're going to have a miserable time as well. So I think brand's one thing. Yeah, they've got to align with what you do or the industry that you do. But you've got to, those people, like anything, you've got to work with people that you like and you respect and you trust. And so, and I work with lots of cultural institutions that really work really well with me. So, over the years, whether it's working with the Opera House or, a great relationship with the National Archives. I'm always doing things with the galleries across the country because I really like art and I like that. But at the same time, I've been working with Brickworks Building Products for probably 6 years now, and I love that team, and we create great content for them, but it also comes down to they're particularly fabulous to work with, and we got a great relationship with them, and they are friends, I'll go above and beyond for them because they've shown faith in me, and you reach that point, and it's a significant amount of time to have a brand alignment, and so it becomes an extension of what you do. So, but when they sort of, a lot of them can come in and out for a moment, and my preference would be to work. Really, is so why we put this time and effort into starting something. Let's keep working, and I think a lot of the time everyone wants to flip and do new things and all the time, and then you don't get to evolve with them, and then you sometimes can't create the best work for them because someone else moves on, or you can't. You sort of say, oh, that'd be good. It would be great to do that. We're not doing that anymore because they can't work out what the hell they want. So, but I don't have it.
That's a really good point. I think that's something that I've experienced a little bit myself, in the sense that this attrition rate or turnover rate seems to be the way forward. But if you can align a strategy and partner with someone that can derive lots of great benefits aligned to that strategy, then there's no reason it can't be a long and successful partnership. And you, as you said, you evolve and you move with that brand and that strategy.
Yeah, and I think one of the things where I'm lucky is that with some of because a lot of it's in the sort of building design space, that those sort of businesses have a strong business to business sort of ethos and environment, and or a big part of their business, I should say. And the B2B a lot of the time really needs to be, people hang around a lot longer because you need relationships, because that's what drives it. So that means that you can also work with the same people, or they move around in the same circles. I suppose that helps a lot. Whereas a lot of the more consumer marketing, people come and go and move all over the place. And so you go, oh, I remember when I used to work with such and such, and that person's well gone, and there's no one there who can remember anything that you did in the past. And you can say, oh yeah, I worked for you guys 8 years ago. And then no one ever knows. There's no one who remembers, I remember doing a campaign for Volkswagen. It was only 5 years after I'd been an ambassador for them, and there was not one person at Volkswagen who knew I'd even been an ambassador. So, that's how many people had moved on in that period of time. So sometimes it's good, because if you do a shit job, no one remembers.
What's next? What's next, Tim? Hopefully you can start touring again. It sounds like that's a passion for you, to get back on the road. We'd love to see
get back
you
to
over
touring.
here in Perth.
Yeah. Doing some more touring and doing some more TV, and I want to get back to, doing some. I think one of the things that smashes the arts in this time and the creative industries is that when there's less work around, less inventive things happen in some ways, because you're struggling too much just to sort of make up months and months of lost work. And so getting back to sort of doing some real passion projects and doing some stuff just because it seems like a good idea, or I really, really want to do this, and there's, it's probably going to cost me money, but I think it's for the right reasons. And also getting back into sort of getting out and about and connecting with people again in the real world, and making those, wonderful relationships and friendships that sort of ultimately fill our lives. I think outside of our own families, is that, being able to get around the country and hang out with different people and enjoy those friendships is so important to me, whether they're here and overseas as well. Like it's be nice to get off the island for a change. It's I think too much time of us being inward looking in this country is not too good for us, I don't think.
I couldn't agree more. It's a great thing in some ways that we live in the country we do, but yeah, it's been a challenging couple of years for everyone. There's no doubt about that. And you're right, that connection. Like I don't think anyone's ever realised how important it is to see people and be with people and find out new ideas and generate creativity by being in the same room and sitting next to someone rather
Yeah,
than.
and you know, there's lots of things in books, and you can get a lot from online, but there's this is sort of nature of the way that an email looks, that if our worlds are all emails and text messages, direct messages, and all the emojis going on in the world can't give something the tone of a conversation or meeting someone. So
it's very transactional at the moment in that nature, and unfortunately this vehicle or this platform that we're talking on today serves a purpose, but that functional creativity or the real known connections or the understanding of one another is just lost. You can't, we all know that. You can't have that when you, as it is when you're in person. I've really enjoyed having a yarn today, Tim. It's been great to talk about your passions and your interests and I guess your journey through school and through growing up in Melbourne right through to your professional career. I'm going to take away that take your pleasure seriously. That's a line that'll stick with me. So I thank you very much for having a chat today.
yeah, good on you, Pav. Thanks so much for your time, mate. It's really good to chat.
Thanks, mate.